see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes,
Great.
can see it.
Okay, all right. Take it away, Bruce.
All right. Well, I'm going to do my best to try to fill in for April as well as myself. Perhaps what we should do, Ganesh, did you reach back out to April to see if she can maybe make it back on for filling in some of the details?
I can do that while you, yeah.
That'd be great. And what
yeah.
we may do is skip over some of the early knowledge that she can bring to this conversation, which is really important. I feel very honored. This is probably my third or fourth presentation to the Housing Committee at the BSA. Back a good 15 years ago, I did the Erie Ellington Homes project, which was one of the first multifamily affordable green projects sponsored by D&D here in Boston. Most recently, I presented Castle Square, which was a 500 unit deep energy retrofit. So I feel truly honored to be working with Father Bill's and MainSprings on this really exciting project. I guess we're doing something right somewhere along the way here. So let's flip to the next slide and I'll see if I can cover some of this for April. So Father Bill's MainSpring and their sister organization, NeighborWorks of Southern Mass, have been doing work with homelessness across Southern Massachusetts and sheltering, providing transitional housing and services. April can certainly fill in much more about the scope of work that they do. The reason she's not on the call at the moment is that she's down at Cape Cod helping to settle the immigrants that have been delivered to Martha's Vineyard. Father Bill's MainSpring has been made the lead agency for that operation. So she's doing good work. Again, they're a nonprofit 501c3. And we have been working with them for many, many years, doing various programs. I must confess that I didn't sleep very well last night. You know, I get a little nervous doing presentations to my colleagues, but probably more to blame would be the fact that I watched the news last night. And then after watching the news, I watched the Ken Burns special on the Holocaust. And I have to say, I probably went to bed very upset, listening to stories of oppression, powerful people taking advantage of immigrants, disenfranchised people. So I'm really grateful to be working with Father Bill's MainSprings. Heroes like that don't come along every day. April and John Yuzwinski and the rest of the crew at Father Bill's has done a fabulous job. We've done a number of, as you can see, we've done a number of jobs with Father Bill's MainSpring. These are just a handful of the ones we've done with them recently. And we, Elton Hampton Architects, have been doing affordable housing and sustainability for 20-something years and more. We're a medium-sized firm, I guess, in the Boston area. There's 8 of us total now. And we do spend most of our work with nonprofit sector, mostly the local community development corporations who provide housing as one of their services. Kind of wish that groups like Father Bill's MainSprings didn't have to exist, but we have a housing crisis and we love working with them. We'll be forever grateful working with both Father Bill's MainSpring and with NeighborWorks of Southern Mass. Let's keep going. We'll get into the project, I believe. Nope. A little more about what happened and what evolved. COVID hit. And they had to start spreading out people from what shelters they had because they couldn't house people that closely. So they moved into hotels. The Brockton site that we're going to visit here was one of the motels that they moved people into. I won't pretend to know the numbers to the extent that April could visit the numbers here, but needless to say, for 69 housing units, doing these kinds of deals are expensive. You know, affordable housing ain't cheap is what we like to say in our business. We can always come back to this if we have questions. Yeah. Go ahead. So I gave you a little bit of a introduction to us, Elton Hampton Architects. I do want to give a shout out to both Juliet Borja and Jay Chung from this office, who did the majority of the project management for the office. It's a rendering of the motel units that we're talking about. Next. So this is one of the things that we will talk about a lot in affordable housing projects with Father Bill's MainSpring. Because they are a mission-driven organization, they're able to take advantage of the Dover Amendment, which is a Massachusetts general laws amendment that states if you have an agricultural, religious, or educational use, you can deviate from the zoning requirements in your specific neighborhood. This sometimes makes it easier, and in our particular case, definitely makes it easier to complete a project either in a residential neighborhood or in a neighborhood that would otherwise not allow this type of housing.
Hey, Bruce, can I just pause for a minute? I just want to share the screen because I am unable to see if folks are still waiting. So I'm just going to stop sharing.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So in this particular case, using the Dover Amendment, the existing condition was that this motel sat in an Industrial 1 district. The Dover Amendment has only a few requirements that we're normally used to abiding by in the zoning ordinances. In this case, you design typically to an R2 residential standard. You're typically limited to 3 stories, in this particular case, 3 stories. One of the important things is that open space is 50 square feet per occupant, which is no problem on this particular site. Parking is reduced under the Dover Amendment to 1 parking space for every 2 dwelling units. Now, in this particular population, of course, we have a virtually empty parking lot because a lot of the homeless come with no cars, obviously. So we find that even doing the minimum parking is too much. We could literally get away with less. So in this particular case, I believe the existing site for the motel had about 109 parking spaces, and we only need 34. And even that's too much. Next. So one of the things that we've discovered over time, working with Father Bills in particular, is we've done a fair number of new construction projects, as you can tell from the photographs. But we've also discovered opportunities where we've got an existing property. And obviously the carbon footprint of using an existing property is lower than if we build a new. And obviously something like a motel with 69 units in it is an opportunity to densify services and provide services more efficiently. In this particular case, this is a 2-story building. It had no elevator. Let's stay here for a moment. I just want to talk a little bit about affordable housing and the advocates such as Father Bill's MainSpring. It's taken a while. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, and we've been pushing sustainable solutions and healthy building materials. But when I started 20-something years ago, 30-something years ago in housing, it was always about unit counts. You know, if you had X number of dollars in your budget, you wanted to maximize the number of units that you could squeeze out of that money. And so therefore, a lot of emphasis was put on less expensive materials. Well, over the years, we've noticed that organizations like Father Bill's have real accountants and real bean counters. And they started paying attention to the numbers that it costs them for maintenance, and selection of materials makes a huge difference for them. So, you know, they started discovering things like, well, carpet is cheap, but wood floors last 50-something years and need very little maintenance. Carpets last maybe 7 years if you're willing to put up with a mess. So not only does it help their bottom line, it helps the health of their occupants as well. So we typically—
Bruce, can I pause you for a minute? Just thrilled to let you all know April's joined us. April is the Chief Operating Officer of Father Bill's. She's a part-time faculty at the Bridgewater State University. She's also a licensed social worker with a master's degree in social work. And she's been with Father Bill's for almost, like 14 years, since 2008, and has been in over various positions, and has been there right from the start of this project. Welcome, April. So if you have anything to add to what Bruce was talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ganesh. And I apologize, folks. I've been in I had some technical issues getting in, so appreciate
we all did,
being. Sounds like Bruce has really been talking about affordable housing probably better than I can. I don't know.
Well, I think you can help out with the specifics of this particular project. We skipped over some of those early slides, April, which we can go back now, or we can go back if you'd just like me to finish up my train of thought. It doesn't matter to me. I can pick it up wherever we are. Why don't we go back a few slides?
And then we can go back to sort of more of a, an organizational overview, and I can fill in a little bit of the blanks about this particular project.
All right, great. Well, I'm now into the guts of it, so that's good. It's more on the detail level. So the motel was 32,000 square feet, not including the pieces that we did not work on, like the restaurant portion, which will be a future phase. The construction cost is $3.7 million. So that comes down to $117 per square foot is what we basically spent on this project. Some of which came by way of existing conditions that we didn't anticipate, like hazardous materials and mold. When we got into doing the handicap units, particularly because the existing condition didn't allow for true handicap accessible bathrooms, we knew we would have to reframe. So what you're seeing in the lower left-hand side is, the reframing of partitions. And when we ripped in to strip the place down to be able to get at that framing, we discovered that years and years of leaks and mold had created a hazardous condition that we needed to remediate. So there was a 4.4% change order, if you will, for the hazardous materials that we discovered. Okay, next. I think as architects, we're always kind of interested in the typology that we end up with. So how did we end up with motel units? Well, for a number of years, as I said, we started with Father Bill's and with NeighborWorks back in about 2006. And we've been working on this homeless transitional housing problem through a number of projects. The ones in Brockton on the upper left-hand side, that's one of our typical Montello units. And you can see in the lower left, the typical floor plan. Double loaded corridor, studio units on each side. And on the right side, you see the typical units that we developed for this particular solution. And they varied a little bit, the kitchen changes, locations, et cetera. But in the office, of course, when April didn't hear us, we referred to these as motel units. And because that's essentially what our familiarity was with this type of unit. So lo and behold, next slide, please. Okay. So lo and behold, April comes to us and says, hey, we have this motel unit, motel that we can buy. And can we make these into living units? Well, if you looked at the floor plan, you'd swear these were the same units I just showed you a moment ago. The square footage is the same, the facilities are the same. So this was a natural, it was a natural fit to just jump right in to think about doing motels and upgrading them to include kitchens. Thank you. So new kitchens on the upper right. We added staff offices where the tavern used to be. We had to change out the laundry. It used to be a single commercial style laundry room that the staff was operating. Now the occupants of the building can use do their own laundry. And then the common space upgrades of materials.
Sorry.
Well, can we go back?
No.
Whoa. I'm getting out of control. There we go. We can stop there. That's fine. And I talked a little bit about choices that were made. The corridors used to be carpeted. The living units used to be carpeted. We have taken all that out because of the sensitivities of the clients. The health of our clients is much more important. And the longevity, honestly, and the maintenance is improved as well. So next. So there's a before and after, typical motel room, typical room with a L-shaped kitchenette. Sometimes the width of the units was sufficient to do a single run of cabinetry, but most of the time we had to make an L shape out of it in order to fit enough appliances in. And you can see the flooring where, oops, back one. You can see on the left-hand side, the flooring used to be carpeted in the living space of the unit. And we swapped it out for a marmoleum product called Click Sink. So again, a healthy, resilient flooring. Next. And so we're almost done. We had our last job meeting. We have a few punch list items left. You can see the signage isn't there yet on the exterior. I noticed the umbrellas aren't there yet, April, on the pool deck, the old pool deck. That used to be the pool, and I swear we didn't fill it all with mulch. I swear to God, we didn't do that. But we did infill the pool and made a really nice hangout space out back. And next, I think, is the last slide. And then we can, I think this is where April can join in here, and then we can go back to some of the earlier slides.
Yeah, and actually, thanks, Bruce. And I would say this is a great starting point for me to talk about Father Bill's and MainSpring when we look at some of these images of folks who are coming home to the Roadway apartments. As Bruce said, the people that we serve, we can go back to the mission, slide 2 on the deck. Father Bill's and MainSpring's been in the business of homelessness for about 35 years. Really with one mission to prevent and end homelessness in Southern Massachusetts. We work with a variety of people. The thing about homelessness is that there is no one type of person who experiences homelessness. We serve, if you can go to the next slide, 41 communities in Plymouth and Norfolk counties. And we serve about 5,000 people unduplicated each year. What that breaks down to be is we serve about 2,000 unduplicated individuals in our emergency shelters in Quincy and Brockton. So that translates to about 250 people each night are accommodated in emergency shelters in our 2 areas. And so I'm going to focus my comments today on our individual services and housing. But I don't want to, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, we also serve over 130 families in primarily the Brockton community who are experiencing homelessness. And we have about 75 units in our housing portfolio where formerly homeless families receive permanent housing. You can go to the next slide. So what Father Bill's and MainSpring is primarily probably identified with is emergency shelter. A lot of the folks from our communities know our nightly shelters that serve people who are without homes. The reality is we're about a $37 million organization, and we actually house more people on any given night than we do shelter. And that is something that, as Bruce said, that is relatively in our organizational history, a new line of business or a new program arm of our organization. So since our first building that Bruce kind of put up on the screen, which is Jeff's Place, and that's 32 units of studio efficiencies for formerly homeless individuals, we now operate almost 700 units of permanent supported housing. We have a 20-member board of directors. We have actually in 200s low, we have about 270 full and part-time staff. We usually in non-COVID times, we've had over 400 volunteers. And that 26.7 is really closer to $37 million on our annual operating budget. Go to the next slide. So as a mission, we really do believe and commit to permanent housing as the solution to homelessness. So what we operate under is a philosophy called housing first. And really what that's about is removing barriers to housing. Most of the people we work with have a lot of difficulty accessing mainstream housing. And I don't think I need to tell this audience about the shortage of affordable housing for anyone who is low income, let alone someone experiencing homelessness. And so really Father Bill's and MainSpring, we focus our housing efforts on those extremely low income individuals and families, people that are below 30% of the area median income. And we've since developed several properties that you can see here over the last 20 years. As Bruce mentioned, the first real bricks and mortar project that we developed, which is Jeff's Place in the lower left corner here, that's where we really figured out with the help of Elton Hampton for sure, that this sort of 300 square foot studio efficiency apartment is just a really ideal response to the folks that are utilizing our individual shelters. Our individual shelter is what you would typically imagine on, you know, so if you've seen a movie or anything like that. These are open dormitories with bunk beds, 40 to 80 people sharing a large room. So you can imagine getting a key to a private apartment with a kitchenette and private bathroom is a real step up. In addition, the square footage only allows for one occupant. So one of the challenges with the folks who have experienced homelessness is they have developed their own sense of community in the homeless system. And so it can be challenging for them at times not to want all of their community to come and join them in their housing opportunity. And so to maintain some safety and parameters around the housing environment and make sure that that's contained, that 300 square foot space is really perfect to accommodate the individuals. For most of the world, and certainly Father Bill's and MainSpring, in 2020, you can go to the next slide, when the COVID pandemic really hit, the need for depopulating some of those large dormitory style emergency shelters became all too apparent. Many of our guests in shelter are immunocompromised, so there are a lot of elders in our population. And so sleeping 3 feet away from a large population in one room just was an unsustainable situation for the people experiencing homelessness when the pandemic happened. And so we were at one point upwards of around an 80% infection rate with COVID. And this was at the peak of the pandemic where there was a lot of fear, a lot of sick people were dying. So you can see on the right side of that slide, we have, within weeks of understanding what we were dealing with, depopulated our emergency shelters. So the top picture there is we utilized a gymnasium at a local YMCA to depopulate our Quincy shelter. And then the tents below were set up in the park next to our MainSpring Brockton shelter. This was, as you may remember, in April and May of 2020, where we had 40 to 50 degree temperatures. And thank you, next slide was great. And rain and wind. So setting up mesh tents for people to sleep nightly in was just not a sustainable response. And we just had no idea how long we were going to need to be depopulated. So we found a distressed hotel, the Roadway apartments, which you see here, and really just started renting it. And then the idea came to mind that maybe we could buy it and then retrofit it to be permanent housing, which is really what Bruce was able to go over with you guys. But you know, the difference here, and many of you can appreciate, going through the public funding process for affordable housing is an arduous process, and certainly for an organization like ours that really is a human service organization, not a housing developer by trade. Navigating the tax credit public capital development world requires usually a ton of administrative capacity as well as a lot of time, and we didn't really have time. So thanks to this DHCD and other leaders in the Commonwealth, we were able to acquire the funds to support this development in a year, which normally takes us about 3 years. So we were able to start construction in 2021 and concluded, as Bruce was saying, this past summer. And we'll go to the next slide, and that would be where Bruce takes it off. And now we are providing, in addition to our 600 units, almost 700, thanks to the Roadway apartments.
Fantastic. Thank you both. I think I'd like to open it up to questions. I have a bunch of questions, but I want to give folks a chance to ask questions, and then I can chime in. Maybe I'll start with mine. So Sarah, go ahead. I can ask.
Oh, no, I was going to suggest
Okay.
just that. Maybe we get folks thinking about what.
Yeah. So my first question is, I'm assuming there is some kind of emergency declaration that helped probably speed this up. So correct me if I'm wrong. But if in either case, do you think you can still do this without like any kind of a pandemic emergency out there in like 2 years, or it's going to be hard to like reproduce this effort?
Well, it's a great question, Ganesh. And what we are still hoping is that, the official declarations and the like really weren't things that facilitated the speed. I think everyone's understanding of the need to remove the barriers was what removed it really created what are the needed rules and what are the rules that are there for maybe negotiable reasons. And so our hope is that this is an example for the public agencies to really continue to parse out those rules. And we're working on another 32 units right now. We're in the process of applying and hoping to get an award in short order to keep in partnership with Bruce to develop another 32 units. And our hope is that, the expectation with ARPA funds is that it moves quickly and that it's distributed quickly. And ARPA has a lot more flexibility. And so the state has really been working hard to expedite that process, which is refreshing to see. So our hope is that this is a kind of kickstart to a different way these funds can be accessed by providers like ours and developers of targeted housing.
Thank you. I just want to welcome Liz Menes, who's the Deputy Commissioner of Planning at DCAM. Very familiar with state processes and has seen a whole bunch of buildings take off. Any other questions? Liz, do you have any questions?
Well, thanks, Ganesh. I was just struck by how low cost the renovation was compared to our costs. I guess, you didn't have, or did you have public procurement requirements, or were you just kind of doing it outside of that? Because I might have missed where all the money came from.
Well, the hard construction cost was 3.7 million, and that's where I translated that into a per square foot, strictly on the construction cost.
Okay, still cheap.
I thought that.
But most of the existing systems stayed in place.
Yeah.
Which I can delve into, but I'm sure somebody's going to ask me the questions about what did you do systematically. But the heating systems were existing PTECs, and we probably couldn't have afforded to centralize the systems. That might be a little too drastic, but with the advent of highly efficient or much more efficient heat pumps and better equipment these days, the future looks good for this kind of solution.
Yeah, it's impressive. Go ahead, Ganesh. I'm sure you got more.
So I thought I remember reading somewhere the cost per unit, including acquisition, everything was close to like $150,000 per unit. Am I correct on that? And that includes like acquisition cost, everything, like it's like the total project. I mean, that's extraordinary. That's amazing.
It's unheard of. And I think that's what made the project so appealing, frankly, to our funders. Right now, I know some of the TDCs being submitted are closer to 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, and even that's seen as pretty affordable. The community of Brockton, I think that lent itself to affordability as well. This was a distressed property and a hotel that wasn't successful. So all that I think lent itself to an opportune moment, but also hopefully if there are opportunities to acquire sites like this, as Bruce mentioned, in terms of like you have some ready systems, so it's a much lower, particularly if it's not occupied. I think the complicating factor for this project in particular was the fact that we had people still living there while trying to do construction. And so to have opportunities where you can acquire a vacant hotel and then have that low construction cost is would be really tremendous to continue.
I would add to that, April, is that, you know, with the right contractors, we've done plenty of renovations, occupied rehabs of properties. Castle Square was one of those examples where by emptying out 12 units and not re-renting those gave you the ability to hopscotch people around the building. And especially with a motel where all the units are the same, except for the few handicap units, you can pretty easily move people around and accomplish it in phases. So I think a good contractor can do this.
I'm curious to, oh, I'm sorry. A question from the audience. Go ahead, Mary, please.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for sharing about this project, April and Bruce. You know, I was curious, you know, what was the reaction from the neighborhood or the community? You know, did you have support from the city of Brockton, neighboring municipalities, neighbors?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mary. I see you're from SMOC. Nice to see a partner agency here. But so yeah, that's a great question. Normally projects like ours are not cited as seamlessly in communities. There's a schism that takes place. I think given the timing, and we've had a really great relationship with the city of Brockton particularly, and given the timing, I think there was a renewed appreciation for this kind of project and the need for housing for this population. And so I think that to go back to Ganesh's question about timing and emergency proclamations, I think if anything that really helped us. We had public meetings about this, and you know, it's an area that is right by the highway. It's a lot of businesses. There's very few residential districts there. There's very little there. It's right across from a hospital. So there wasn't really any pushback because there really wasn't anybody paying attention, I'll say. Yeah, that definitely factored in.
Well, and I was hoping to kind of pull that into a kind of bigger picture question of like, so what might be the magic recipe to recreate this success? And so I'm sort of thinking, is this, you know, if you were to go be scouting additional sites, right? Was there, you just described the kind of proximity to residential areas might have been one of the factors that kind of facilitated the timeline and the let's say lack of opposition to the population coming in. But thinking just on also the scale of the building, were there particular systems or other things that if one were to attempt to redo this project and kind of continue to recreate it, that really kind of helped facilitate that success?
I can speak to maybe the community part, and then Bruce can certainly talk about the infrastructure and building part. For us, it's you know, it's not unique to this project that we are typically looking to integrate into communities. For us, school proximity is a factor for when we're housing individuals, particularly adult individuals, because a lot of the folks have behavioral health concerns, and so we typically try to keep our distance from public school systems, that kind of thing. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, this was kind of a unicorn, being really not in a proximity to residential areas, but usually if there is a large kind of residential area that we're building or acquiring in, we will try to do a lot of community outreach to educate people about our programs, to really offer tours. So we do a lot of community outreach and engagement when we're before we're attempting to cite a project. And I can stay on a few extra minutes. Bruce?
Appreciate it. I know it's time, but Bruce and April graciously agreed to stay for a few more minutes. So if anyone has any questions, by all means, please stay. And if you have to leave, totally understand.
To continue on the question asked, systems-wise, I think we touched on this earlier. The fact that more and more as we get to higher efficiency units, better insulated. We did replace windows, by the way, on this project. So that was a huge step towards increasing the insulation level of the enclosure. But as we focus more and more on that kind of detail, our energy needs will come down, and decentralized systems, which happens to be the way motels are typically done, start to make better and better sense. So I think it's replicable. I think that we were fortunate in having a good contractor who was savvy about ordering materials and didn't get hung up too badly with appliances. PTEX, we worried about the PTEX, we worried about refrigerators, we worried about microwaves. All of these things were key to being able to successfully move people in quickly. And you do need a savvy team, I will say that. But the formula, I think, is repeatable, and certainly it's not rocket science. I think going in, we probably could have been even a little more efficient if we knew what the end game was going to be. At the beginning, John Yaz, April's colleague, gave us a pep talk, gave the development team a pep talk saying, no, go, 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 go. We want people in tomorrow. So make decisions based on that rather than on what we think professionally, is the right decision to make. So things like lock sets, we said, well, if it's an operating motel, it must have good lock sets. So we'll leave those be. Well, of course, we ended up, halfway through, we're redoing all of the lock sets. It's the typical kinds of things like that.
Just so everyone's clear.
but it's, there will be a lot of lessons learned that we should probably somehow write it up, because this is going to be a formula for other successful projects.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is amazing. This is such a great presentation and topic to start off our fall series. And we have a new administration coming in. There's talk of a housing commission, and I hope this features prominently in terms of strategies within their toolkit. And we, on behalf of the state, will certainly look into it further and see how best we can assist organizations like yours and encourage designers like Place Trailers to be a part of this transformation. So very thankful and grateful that you guys could spend the time and effort to participate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was, really great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate it.
Sure enough. See you around.
Yep.